behind ending a woman's right to choose or reproductive rights. It is this group that is saying we need to seal the borders and stop allowing immigrants to enter this country. These are the folks that are saying, well, we need to alter history to reflect that there was no transatlantic slave trade. We need to ban books that do not or that are not in line with our narrative of history and our view of this world and this country. White Christian nationalists. Well, let's be realistic. Christian and nationalists do not go together. If you are a Christian, and I'm not just talking about somebody that goes to church, there's a difference. People that go to church go for many different reasons. If you are someone who believes in Christ and in the message of Christ and is trying to live a Christ like lifestyle, then you understand that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So, exactly who the hell are you to tell people they can't enter through the southern border? These are the same people that Columbus found when he came here lost on his voyage going east to India. That might be one of the reasons why we call people in this country Indians. Because here's a man that says he claims to be some great mariner who did not know he wasn't in India. And you don't discover a place where millions of people have already been living for generations, in fact, centuries. So, again, nationalism and Christianity do not go together. The nationalists are people who, I guess, their main focus is one place. Their focus is America and shaping America to fit their narrative, their beliefs. And again, their beliefs is right out of the Handmaid's Tale. And, for the women who may be listening, particular Caucasian women, in this country, it is odd that for white women, they didn't have much more in the way of rights than black folks. We were on the plantation, we had zero rights. What right did a white woman have in the 17th, 18th century? What rights did they have in the early 20th century? Up until probably the 70s, a white female could not go into a bank and open a bank account, could not open a or could not have a credit card unless she had the permission of her husband to open a bank account and or get a credit account, a credit card. For Caucasian women in this country, they did not receive the right to vote until 45 years before black people. What is this hatred that America has with white women? Why is it that in America, white women were burned at the stake? And it wasn't black men doing this. It wasn't brown people crossing the border. This was white men, European men, so-called enlightened men who said, oh, you're a witch. And so because we believe you to be a witch, we have to punish you. And the punishment was draconian. Well, I guess around maybe the 1960s, two things happened. One was the advent of the pill, the birth control pill. At that point, women began to advocate for freedom. They didn't want to just sit at home and manufacture children. They wanted to go out and compete for jobs. They wanted greater educational opportunities. So they fought for freedom. And it was hard fought. Why is it the men that you lie next to, that you produce children for, that say they love you, why is it they don't want you to have education or to have a good job? Why they want to keep you at home barefoot and pregnant? Why is it that in some of these movies, these horror movies, it's always the white woman that gets chopped up by Freddy or Michael Myers or some other, hideous creature. These are all suggestive of what this country thinks. Here we are in 2024. How many female presidents have we had in this country? Why is it some of these countries that we call third world have had female presidents that have led the country successfully? Why don't we have it here in America? Yet we say other places the thinking is backward. Well, whose thinking is really the backward thinking? Who are the backward thinking people? And now we live in a society where one group of people have decided that, look, your way of thinking is wrong. We are the people that God has given the authority to basically dictate to you how you should live. So in other words, what we're saying is God hates reproductive rights. God does not like immigrants. God isn't too fond of black people, brown people. God clearly isn't fond of women. And if you read in the scripture, well, in the book of Genesis, where Adam and Eve have allegedly consumed this fruit, well, Adam, he got an eviction notice. He said, Adam, look, you can't live in the garden anymore. You got to get out. And now, instead of everything being provided to you, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to dig in the dirt and produce for yourself. Eve, on the other hand, she caught the brunt of it. Now, Adam, when he was alone in the garden, he was in direct communication with God. Eve wasn't there yet. Adam is the one that God entrusted so much to. Yet Eve, who showed up later, got the brunt of the punishment. And that is still the backward thinking today. For us, meaning black, brown people, in Africa, there is a long legacy of women who sat on the throne, sometimes alone. Cleopatra, just one of them. And let me be clear. There were 7 Cleopatras. I'm talking about Cleopatra the 7th. She sat on the throne of Egypt alone and did so successfully for almost 30 years. And there is Hatshepsut and others across the width and breadth of Africa who ruled. Yet in this country, somehow we got it in our heads, brothers, that women are not as capable as we are. Where do we get that foolishness from? During the height of the civil rights struggle, there were so many black women who were integral to the success of the civil rights movement. These sisters sat behind the men. They stayed quiet, but without them, it could never have been possible. Nowadays, we don't want to give sisters their due, their credit. They are now the most educated class in America. And yet, with all their education, you have people, these white Christian nationalists, who are saying, no, you don't have the same skills or capability that we do. In fact, you take someone like Elon Musk. He did an interview with Don Lemon. And he basically told Don Lemon, listen, these DEI programs, we need to get rid of them. And basically what's happening is the standards have been lowered. Lowered for whom? What he's saying in, I guess, a roundabout way is that standards have been lowered for people of a darker hue or women, so that they are incapable of doing the same job as a man and doing so, successfully. Folks, think about that before you go out and take that test driving that Tesla. This is the man that's saying, let's do away with DEI. So for those of us who have benefited from certain programs like affirmative action, well, now we need to do away with all of that. We can thank Uncle Thomas Clarence for the destruction of affirmative action, a program that he benefited from. But now he's locked the door and threw away the key. And Uncle Thomas, when he's not sleeping, sits on the court and only wakes up when there are issues concerning the Black community or now women and Donald Trump. Other than that, Uncle Thomas Sam don't have too much to say. You know, if you watch Roots, I guess Clarence Thomas would be somebody like Fiddler. Fiddler was, the dutiful fiddle player that never wanted to ruffle master's feathers. And here you have Clarence Thomas that forget ruffling the feathers, he won't even touch them. His thing is, look, you Black folks, y'all are in trouble if I got anything to do with it. You know what I mean? All the programs y'all had before, done, over, canceled Christmas. And the Supreme Court, which is supposed to interpret the Constitution and tell us what is constitutional, what's unconstitutional. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When Joe Biden was elected president, he said he was going to address the serious need for relief for student debt. You have people graduating from colleges and universities saddled with $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in tuition loans that they have to pay back. Well, in this country, how many high-paying jobs are we producing? Now, we got jobs if you want to work in Walmart, or if you want to work for Jeff Bezos at Amazon. Sure, they need pickers. But how do you pay back your student loans? How do you buy a home, a car? How do you afford rent? It's not possible, even with the $15 increase in minimum wage. So you leave college saddled with debt, and you come out into the world, go into the job market, and what do you find? There is a competition for jobs now. And the reason for the competition is not the immigrants, it's not Black people. The real problem in America is capitalism and our government's relationship with the media. Now, what do I mean by that? In this country, corporate America decided probably in the 80s, once Reagan was elected president, they started, I guess incrementally, dismantling the labor movement. Ronald Reagan gets elected, and the air traffic controllers are on strike. Now, why does anybody go on strike? Well, let's be realistic. Better pay, better benefits, and to hold on to the benefits that they have been fought for. They can get to an office and says, no, fire them all. Shortly thereafter, Greyhound bus drivers went on strike. Now, Greyhound is a private company, but because of their affiliation with the Interstate Commerce Commission, Reagan stepped in again and fired the Greyhound bus drivers. I can remember when I worked at the bus terminal talking to some of the drivers who had been there prior to Reagan. And they said they were making more money in the 70s than they were in the 90s. Why? Because Reagan decided there are better ways to, I guess, not help the American people, but to help corporate America. So over time, we began to see the slashing of benefits like pensions. How many jobs have pensions anymore? How many jobs will provide you with health care after you leave? How many will give you health care even while you're working and cover your entire family? So the relationship between government, corporate America, and the media is corporate America, right? So what they do is they lie to you. They tell you, listen, you got to worry about these brown folks that are coming up. Because even though Donald Trump has no idea who these people are, what they've done, names, anything about them, he says, well, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing guns, they're rapists, and I suppose some of them are good people. You suppose? How do you know who these people are, Mr. Trump? Did you just wake up one day and decided, oh, yeah, I know all these people. I know all about them. Well, did you know about the Central Park jogger kids that you took out an ad in every New York periodical to say that they were worthy of death? Did you know that they were innocent? Now that it's been found out that there was someone else in the park that night who committed this heinous crime and who confessed and has now been convicted and incarcerated, did you say, I'm sorry? Did you offer any compensation for what these boys endured or these young men endured? But that's another story. Let's get back to what's going on in this country. If you listen to some of these right-wing radio stations and look at some of these right-wing websites, these folks are dead serious. Not only are they talking about reproductive rights, they're talking about jobs. They're tired of having women compete with men. They want to go back to a time when things made sense to them. Now, I'm old enough to remember a show called Father Knows Best. And starred Robert Young. And every morning he would get up. His wife would be downstairs in the kitchen with her apron on, making breakfast. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bacon, toast, and coffee. And the kids would be sitting there waiting to have their breakfast and go to school. After breakfast, he'd pick up his briefcase, kiss his wife on the cheek, and out the door. And the wife stayed home and cooked and cleaned and took care of the children when they came home from school. Well, in the 1950s, that was feasible. One salary would take care of the entire family. And I'm talking about not just owning a home, 2 new cars, vacations, college funds, stocks and bonds. Well, who can do that nowadays, even with 2 and 3 salaries coming in? Cost of living is increasing every year, and the increases we get are way below the cost of living increases. So we're working harder, but we ain't bringing home no more money. If you work overtime, the government taxes you at a rate of about 51%. So you out there busting your hump, trying to make some extra money for your family, but the government is getting theirs right off the top. And what are you doing with that money? Well, let's see now. We're supporting the genocide in Israel. We're bombing innocent people in Yemen. And of course, we are building bases all over the world so we can attack Russia, China, and anybody else that says America is wrong. And in this country, well, we got a war here too. It's an ideological war. And these white Christian nationalists think that the only one with any common sense is them. And they need to dictate to us when we can produce children. And maybe the kind of children we produce. We're talking about banning people like Muslims. We want to close the southern border, saying it is a crisis. You know, what's interesting is for Europeans who colonized the entire planet, who everywhere they showed up took control of the resources and the people. Now that some of these people are coming to the land you say is yours, all of a sudden lock the door. The door was wide open when you came. In fact, in the early 19th century, the American government wanted more Europeans to come into this country. Why? Because we wanted to do the westward expansion. And as we went west, well, we realized, well, there's people living here. Well, that's okay. We'll kill a lot of them, and the rest will drive onto areas where there's basically nothing, or we think there's nothing. That sort of mentality is alive today. You know, I guess they're not using the words manifest destiny anymore. They use words like, we want our country back. What's the difference? Somebody explain it to me. And if you want your country back, who took it from you? How did they get it? You know, for a lot of people, you know, we want to play the blame game. But the reality is, if there are no jobs in America, it's not because of the immigrants. It was corporate America. Like here in Pennsylvania, it was corporate America that closed down Bethlehem Steel. So let's be realistic. If you close the border and allow zero immigrants into this country, if you have issue a total ban on Muslims, which is what Donald Trump said he's going to do, well, if you do all of that, are gas prices going to go down? What about your food prices? What about your taxes? Are you still going to be struggling to feed your family? Even, you know, you want to keep the immigrants out? Is that going to put more food on the table? Think, folks. Your enemy is not some brown man that's coming here to get a job picking tomatoes. That's not your problem. Your problem is capitalism. Capitalism feeds on its own. So you see people that, you know, were successful, you know, had a home, cars, you know, wonderful portfolio. All it takes is one catastrophic illness. Or what happens when the company decides we're going to send the jobs to India, to Pakistan, we're going to send them to Vietnam. What happens then? You know, during COVID, I was looking at the news and they were showing where they had these food distribution programs and sometimes like parking lots to shopping malls. And it was interesting. You would see cars pulling up. These were high-end cars. Mercedes, you know what I mean? BMW, Land Rovers. You might live in an exclusive neighborhood, but when a pandemic hits and you can't get to work and you have bills to pay, you used to shop in some of these, you know, Wegmans, you know, D'Agostino, these high-end supermarkets. But when there's no money coming in, sometimes you have to get off the high horse and realize I got to feed my kids. That means I have to humble myself and go get online and wait for a handout, just like the brown man, just like the black man, just like the poor white folks that we call poor white trash. What makes you any different? Somebody gets sick, catastrophic illness, and your insurance decides we ain't paying for it. What do you do then? There goes those stocks. You got to sell them. There goes, you know, the nice house in Hamptons. Got to sell that too. And you know something? Capitalism don't care. They will place you in a heartbeat. So in this country, we need to wake up and smell the coffee. And on the way coming in, I was listening to urban radio, and they were talking pretty much about this issue of women's rights. And he highlighted all of the negative things that are going on in this country as it relates to black, brown, and poor people. Now, down in Louisiana, they said there were a group of about 10 people that got together and they decided they are going to basically politically and economically annex a section of Louisiana where only white folks are going to live. Yeah, let me say that again. Annexed politically and socially a section of Louisiana where only white folks are going to live. How is that possible? Well, if you haven't read haven't read Project 2025, I know it's long. It's like a 900-page document. You know what? Maybe you should skim it. See exactly what these folks are planning. They want to do away with the Supreme Court and Congress. They want to have one branch of government. And guess who they want to head it? That's right, Donald J. Trump. Trump has already said not only is he going to seal the border and issue a total ban on Muslims coming into this country, he also said he's going to allow the states, if they so elect, to monitor women's pregnancies. The hell do you mean by that? Yeah, that's right. That means if you live in a state in a cherry red deep south and you have been raped and you do not want to carry the child of the rapist, you have to leave your state. Well, before you can leave your state, somebody may have to report to the government of your state that you're pregnant. And if you leave the state and you come back and you're no longer pregnant, well, guess what? Some states have already said they will prosecute you for murder. My parents' home state of South Carolina is one of those states. If they find out you left for the purpose of having an abortion, when you come back into that state, you are going to jail. And that is in America. We're not talking about what we call these communist countries. We're not talking about the third world, so-called third world countries. We're talking about America. We are the beacon of democracy. And yet, they want to tell people when and where to have a baby. You know, what happened to America? I think what happened is that America's always been the same. The people that were the segregationists, they never went anywhere. They kind of just blended in for a period of time, just waiting for the right time, for the right candidate, for the right political climate. And they found it. They found their leader in Donald J. Trump. Think about this now. The Republican Party, since the 70s, has been winning election after election. How, when Democrats outnumber them almost 2-1? Well, for them, like I said, they use some tactics, some dirty, but they work. Now, since Trump has left office, the Republicans are losing election after election. And yet, the Republican legislators, still are loyal to Trump. He can't get them across the finish line, but they're loyal to him. Right now, the Republican Party is splintered. Have you seen the news? Marjorie Taylor Greene, this little crazy chick, wants to say she's going to get rid of the Speaker of the House. And what did he do? He negotiated a deal to prevent a government shutdown. But she's like, oh, no, you negotiated with the enemy. The enemy? What the hell is wrong with you, lady? You know, we have a Congress that will not speak to one another. One side of the aisle refuses to talk to the other side. You know, how do you get anything done? If there's a husband and wife and the two of you can't agree on nothing, how do you maintain your household? How do you take care of your children and the other responsibilities if the two of you don't talk? For Japan, Japan is the only country ever to have two atomic bombs dropped on them. And who did it? That's right, we did. And to this day, Japan is a U.S. ally. Now, if they can work out their differences after we slaughtered countless Japanese, why can't these folks who wear red ties and blue ties figure out how to fix this country? The answer is they don't have a clue. But I know one thing: when Jewish students said we feel threatened on campus, didn't they jump up, Republicans and Democrats, and said, listen, we need to have some of the presidents of these Ivy League colleges come down here to Washington and tell us what is their plan for protecting Jewish students on campus. Well, who protected Sandra Bland? Who protected George Floyd? The sister down in Kentucky, in Louisville, lying at home in her bed at night, shot and killed by Louisville police at the wrong address. Who protected her? And it's not just black folks. We talk about the immigrants and how we should fear them. I see commercials on Fox News and a few other of these so-called conservative stations, and they keep running this ad showing MS-13 and how this violent gang of misfits who we should fear. Well, years ago, and I'm talking probably in the 90s, there was a man, I believe he was in Idaho. His name was Randy Weaver. Randy Weaver and his family lived off the grid. Well, I guess there was some sort of issue that the government thought, well, we need to step in and handle this. I think it involved a firearm. Anyway, the FBI and ATF, actually the ATF, showed up at Randy Weaver's house. And in the aftermath, they killed his dog, his son, his wife, and I think the baby she was holding on to. Well, guess who did the killing? It wasn't immigrants. It wasn't black youth, who everybody's afraid of. It wasn't the Chinese. It wasn't the Russians. It was the U.S. government. Eventually, they settled with Randy Weaver for millions of dollars. Well, now, who remembers when MS-13, Black Lives Matter, and a few other groups that the government says are subversive, who remembers when they went down to Waco, Texas, and stormed the Branch Davidian compound? Oh, wait, that was the government, wasn't it? It was the government that used tanks to kill innocent women and children, not in Iraq, not in Afghanistan, in Waco, Texas. And why did they do this? Because they said David Koresh sold one shotgun that was an inch too short. Again, it wasn't MS-13, wasn't Black Lives Matter, wasn't the Nation of Islam, all these other groups we're supposed to be afraid of. It was the ATF and the FBI. Did anybody see the raid on Puffy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami? Now, exactly why do you need an armored truck? Multiple armored trucks. Why do you need long guns if you're serving a search warrant? What do you believe is a threat? I looked at some of the footage because there's a documentary. It's called The Downfall of P. Diddy. I looked at some of the footage, and here you have Homeland Security agents in full battle dress. They're pointing long guns at one of Puffy's sons. I'm sorry, are you serving an arrest warrant on them? Why do you need to point semi-automatic long guns at people who you do not have an arrest warrant for? What threat did they pose to you? This is the America that we live in. Do not sleep. These folks, just like the ATF with Randy Weaver and with the Branch Davidians, they're trying to justify their budget. So they're pulling out all their toys, right? The M16s or whatever long gun they're using. They're pulling out the Bearcat. The armored vehicles are called a Bear and a Bearcat. They're pulling those out, and they're going to raid P. Diddy's house. Is P. Diddy on the same level of Al Capone, John Gotti? Have we ever known P. Diddy to take an assault rifle and shoot up someplace? What is the justification for all of that military-style hardware? Something is wrong. Something is wrong with our government. Something is wrong with our society. And something is damn sure wrong with our economic system. It's killing the same people that we say we're helping. Folks, make no mistake about it. Anything the government said they're going to war with got worse. Remember the war on drugs? Hell, it's more drug addicts. Remember the war on poverty? More people are poor. Everything the government goes to war with, remember, folks, it gets worse. So if the government tells you they're going to war with something, get out of the way, because it's going to get much worse. And in this country, right now, we got an election coming up in November. And I listen to urban radio, and they're talking about how we need to support the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. Well, look, I'm not going to tell anybody how you should vote, because, a lot of people are afraid of what will happen under a second Donald Trump term. All these horrible things that are being proposed, well, they're a very distinct possibility. So they're saying we should support the Democrats. The Democrats are the party right now that are the number one supplier of arms and ammunition to Israel that is slaughtering people in the Gaza Strip. Not only that, they have bombed the Iranian consulate in Syria. And they've launched attacks into Lebanon. So what we're seeing over there is a widening conflict, and America keeps sending them money and arms to continue their wars. I didn't say war, I said wars. Because these things are not going to end. What Israel wants to do is expand their borders to something called Eretz Yisrael. In other words, they want to take all of Palestine. They want to take a lot of the neighboring countries, including Saudi Arabia. They want to make all of that Israel. And we are supporting them in their genocidal attacks around what's called the Middle East. So we're supposed to ignore all of that and vote for Biden, because we're terrified of Trump. Black folks, if you're listening, let me say this to you. It was not the Democrats or the Republicans that protected us from colonialism. It was not the Democrats or Republicans that came to our aid when we were enslaved. It was our belief in higher power and our ancestors. We now are so afraid to leave the plantation because we're not sure what's beyond the gates. So you have so many of our educated Black folks that are sitting there banging on the bars of the jail, not realizing the door is unlocked. All you got to do is open it and walk out. But the fear is walking out and being forced to do something for ourselves. So if these folks down in Louisiana want to break away and start their own society of white folks, why are we doing it? And look, I'm not saying something new. Marcus Garvey said, in 1915, up you mighty race, do something for yourself. Elijah Muhammad said it. Malcolm X said it. Minister Farrakhan saying it now. Martin Luther King, before he died, he said to Harry Belafonte, he said, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. Well, if the house was burning in the 60s, it's a full-on inferno now. And yet, we still don't want to leave the inferno. If you don't smell the smoke and feel the heat, well, you know what? Then you deserve what you get. If you want to vote for the Democrats, that's fine. But understand something. Joe Biden is going to stick by his commitment to Israel. And if Israel starts a conflict, a major conflict in the Middle East, or what's called the Middle East, you see these students protesting on campus, people are complaining, well, they're doing damage to the building, there's violence. America's the most violent country on the planet. And if Israel starts another major conflict in that region, some of these students on these Ivy League campuses that don't have the $90,000 and $100,000 to pay tuition, some of them are on assistance from the government, financial aid. Well, before you can get financial aid, at least for my generation, you had to sign up with something called a selective service. In other words, you got to put your name down on the books, just in case there's a draft and they need bodies. So you talk about these students protesting. These students are fighting for their lives. These students are fighting for the lives of people in Palestine. And a lot of us in this country, we're angry at the students, but we should be angry at ourselves. These students are fighting for something. The hell of the vast majority of us fighting for a good seat in front of the TV, maybe a good concert seat, maybe to see who's got a beef with who. Folks, GM had to fight tooth and nail to get a decent contract and to get their pensions restored and other benefits. Why aren't more people, workers across this country, who have been taking a beating for decades, why aren't they out protesting? Yet we're sitting at home looking at, TV, complaining about the students and what they're doing. At least they have the integrity and the courage to go out and fight for something. They say if you don't fight for something, you fall for everything. And in America, we're falling for the same tricks and the same games year in and year out.
Hey, Ron, I got to jump in on this, man.
Go right ahead, brother. Go right ahead.
You got the hairs on my back standing up. Yo, you fire holes in the nation right now, man. This is crazy. But there's a culture, just to your point you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't the workers actually up in arms about all the stuff? They cutting the pensions and
that's right,
and all the stuff. I got the answer to that. You know why?
Why?
Because they did the same thing they did us when we was on the job.
Yeah.
They said, y'all are good, but the next academy class that comes in,
kill the unborn.
Yeah, y'all had 27 vacation days. They only getting 20.
Right.
You had 20 years, or they getting 22 and a half.
Right.
They are screwing the next guy.
Yep.
So the guys that got it sweet, they not trying to ruffle their feathers. There's no more Michael Jordans that's going to say, take part of my salary. I just need a team. It's selfishness.
Right.
So they're not going to fight. The people that already are grandfathered in, they're going to be quiet.
And you know what?
It's sad, but it's true.
You're right. And you know what? Listen, we both went law enforcement. So, when it came time to negotiate, a lot of people weren't willing to sacrifice for these next generations. Well, we don't realize these next generations are our kids and our children's children. So when they go to sign up for a job, what's going to be offered to them? Here's a badge and a gun, a radio, and a nightstick. And that's about all you're going to get. Oh, we'll give you a paycheck every 2 weeks. But if you want a pension, we don't do that anymore. If you want health care, well, we might provide you with health care, but your family, you got to go out and find a policy for them. So, for the people in this country, my focus is you need to wake up. You need to stop, rushing out to go stare at a damn eclipse and just look at what's going on right in Washington or in your city, your town, and be aware, because these folks, these white Christian nationalists, they're coming for you. They're coming for women. They're coming for black. They're coming for brown. And they really don't have much use for poor white folks either. This has always been the plan in America, but they've always kept us divided. Why? Because it's so much easier to fight one group and pit everybody else against them, say that they are the bad guys, when the real bad guys sitting in Washington negotiating with the government to take away more of your rights. Anybody remember what happened on 9/11? The real enemy or the real crime was afterwards, they came out with the Patriot Act. And they took away our rights. Did we get them back yet? Do you still have to strip naked to get on the plane? You have to be exposed to radiation to get on the damn plane? And how many terrorists have we caught going through an airport? Let's add it up. Don't take long to add up zero. So, these are just the games that are being played. These are mind games. Folks, stop watching, stop staring at Fox News for hours. All they do is have different people come on and repeat the same story. So you sit there for 4 or 5 hours and hear the same story repeated by just a different talking head. Forget CNN, HLN. Turn on your computer, read a book. Understand what's happening in this country before it's too late. This country, right, is on its last legs. The American dollar isn't second in the world anymore behind the British pound. We're down to number 8 and falling. You and me about the same age group, right?
No, I'm not younger than you. No, we are the same age. But the new fix in New York City, especially, those speed cameras, they supposed to be saving, lives. It's a money grab.
$1 billion.
And cars drive past me every day on the highway like it's a racetrack. They speed it more than they ever speeded in their life.
Well, now they want to do congestion pricing, right? More money they're taking from working class and poor people. You can barely afford to come into the city to work. And now another $15 on top of that. And who's that benefiting? How's that going to help the poor people in New York? They say that money's going to go to the transit authority. The transit authority? They already charge, $3.75 a ride?
Well, they got the National Guard in the subways right now.
It's crazy.
It's out of control.
It's really out of control. And you want me to pay more money to ride a subway where you can't protect me? That's insane. But this is what they're doing. And where's the protest in Manhattan? In front of transit headquarters on Brooklyn. Where's the protest? Where's the outrage? We're sitting there looking at TV, shaking our head, saying, somebody ought to do something. No, you ought to do something. And don't get mad at these students because they took it upon themselves to do something. Give these children a pat on the back because they are the ones who are going to lead this country out of this cycle of madness that we find ourselves in. Let's be realistic. Joe Biden nor Donald Trump are the right people put in the White House. One said he's going to be a dictator on day one. But don't be no fool. Anybody who has absolute power on day one, on day two, they're going to say, you know what, I'm just going to give it up. I don't really want it. Don't be a fool. Trump is a megalomaniac. He is a guy who comes out of a courtroom where he's been given a gag order and does a press conference in front of the damn courtroom where the judge just told him, shut the hell up. So let's be realistic. If you give that man absolute power, you better believe he's going to maintain that power. And Trump and Biden, on the other hand, you keep him in office, well, he's going to keep sending weapons around the world, and more war, more bloodshed, and more American bodies coming home in bags or blown to bits, only to go to these VA hospitals that are substandard, and only to be told, oh, sorry, I know you served our country. I know you're horribly wounded, but we don't have any jobs. We're not hiring right now. Check back in about 6 months. So, folks, I wish the ladies were here today because, I'd like to have some of the ladies give their input on what they're feeling as it relates to this American Handmaid's Tale situation that's going on. But again, reproductive rights affects male and female. And on the plantation, we had to be selected by the master. We had to ask, can I marry Nettie? Can I make children with Nettie? The master would take the big, strong buck and say, now you go make babies with Nettie because I need the next generation to pick the cotton, build my plantation up. And folks, make no mistake, that can come back again. Not only is it Project 2025, there's also a group in this country that wants to do away with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That is the act that said you cannot have white only anymore. That is the act that says, no, you can't just go lynch this young man because you have nothing else to do. So folks, be aware. Don't be asleep. I know the government tells you they don't want the woke movement. Well, don't call it the woke movement. Call it the awake movement. Wake up, look around, see what's going on, and fight like hell. Like Trump said, fight like hell. You won't have a country. Fight like hell, or your children will be slaves, just as they are now. We're just slaves that are paid a little bit of money. So, folks, I thank you for this last hour. I want to thank Rudd for coming all the way from the city to be our engineer today.
I wouldn't miss it for the world, brother.
Thank you, brother. And we have our next group coming in. Sit back and enjoy it. We'll hear some real good sounds coming up with Strategy. And we'll be back here next Thursday. Y'all have a good weekend.